Welcome to Start Making. This week's video, well, this one is a brilliant one. However, you're gonna watch it and you're gonna think, that guy, he knows nothing about putting in windows and doors. But in true Start Making fashion, I'm gonna try anyway because, spoiler, the windows went all right. But let me take you back a little bit to the past so you can see how we did it. And if there's any professional carpenters watching, I'm sorry, that was a complete bodge job from start to finish. There's a couple of decisions you need to make when you're putting your windows in. You can buy the complete units that open, double glazed, etc. Or you can do what I did and make your life significantly harder. These are toughened glass, double glazed, just the panels, and now I've got to make a box to put them in and put that in the window. As I've said from the start, this is not a how-to. This is not necessarily the best way, it's the only way that I could think of, and I'm just gonna give it a shot. If you've got a better way, go your way. The width of the void that we're trying to fill is one of the 2x4s, which I've got at 95mm, and then the other side you've got a 11 to 12mm thick OSB sheet. Now the inside is gonna be clad by the same thickness of plywood. So that gives us approximately 119mm that we're gonna be working with. And for soundproof on the inside of each one of these studs, to stop noise going straight through the solid bits of the wall where there's no insulation, I'm going to also have some acoustic tape, which is just a thin foam, 1 or 2mm, but it's going to be squashed. So I've got some pine, square edged, haven't got to do anything to it, just cut it into length, and it is approximately 122mm in width. So the first thing I'm going to do is check all the wood fits. I'm going to make sure that the window and the thickness of the wood I've got is compatible. I'm not going to need too many shims, etc. And if that's the case, I'm going to start cutting. That's the plan anyway. Let's see how it gets on. So I'm just going to test this on each of the openings because I know I put this building together and I am very, very well aware that there's going to be discrepancies. A couple of mil here and there, but I'm just making sure that in the very, very, very worst case scenario, they will actually fit. You're not going to believe me, but actually they didn't fit. And one of them I did have to plane back the wood, but you're not going to see that because of the joys of YouTube. So I'm going to show you the first 2 windows that I put in, and one will be from one side, one will be from the other. Some of the angles are a bit dodgy because inside the building the light is terrible. Anyway, the first thing you need to do is to cut through the membrane from the outside of the building and staple it back onto the frame that is already there. Then we're going to cover the bit we stapled with the frame for the actual window. That way it gives you the best chance of keeping this all watertight. You can cut away the majority of it as long as you've stapled the rest of it to the actual side pieces. And then once you've done that, you've just got to cut the wood to size. Make sure you measure it right and check that your window's obviously square, otherwise you're going to need to shim it more than you do anyway. Now this is where I've pulled out my Craig jig. This I swear by for beginners. I would normally cut this with a circular saw and a speed square, but actually if I want to get straight edges and I want to get square edges, this is far, far more accurate and it gives me some really good repeatable cuts as well. But go your own way on this. I decided I was going to do one window from start to finish, and then once I'd done that, I just repeat cut every piece for all of the other windows. The way it's laid out, you basically have these wider pieces first, check the window fits, and then battens hold the window in place with some insulation in between. So once I knew these fit, I cut a few more for the other windows and I cut all of the smaller battens. Now the smaller battens, if you've got an eagle eye here, you'll see I'm doing in pairs. It's just to make sure that each side of the same piece is going to be identical, and by that I mean the bottom layer has one in front and one behind the window, so I'm just making sure they match. Now I have seen people make these boxes as a single unit and then fit it all into the space with the pane already in there. I just thought for someone like myself that might be a little bit too much to commit to and get right on every single one of the 4 windows. So I did it this way, made sure they all fit, and then I took everything out again and got some black barn paint, which I'll leave a link to in the description because it is very good quality, and they say 1 coat, it's 2 coats. I got rid of all the dust and I applied 2 coats to every single piece that I was going to put in. You'll notice I haven't gone to the trouble of sanding these back particularly. I'm just going to blow the dust off them and paint them. If you want to put a little bit more care into it, I would highly recommend that. If this is a garden room to you rather than a workshop, you can put as much effort into the finish as you think is important to yourself. Me, I just wanted to get them painted to keep the weather off them and to stop the glare coming in through the window. That's why I chose black.
It's a bit of a tricky, awkward angle to get to because I didn't want my body in the way of the shot. So I've gone up to one of the rafters to put the camera. Hopefully you can see everything. So my first idea was to nail everything. And then I thought, well, actually, these aren't going to be seen because the battens on top will cover them. So I screwed them. And once I got all of these into place, I then had to put the battens in. Now, my original idea was to nail all of these. And you'll see me do that on this first window. But you get a little bit scarily close to the glass with the hammer. And so eventually you'll see as I change along the windows, I actually end up screwing all of these boards in, and then I'll go back and I'll put some filler in and do the last coat of paint later and just not worry about smashing one of these panes, because when you're weighing it up, waiting for one of these panes of glass to get delivered is going to take another couple of weeks, and I just didn't want to wait to get the whole building watertight. Now this stage the window's actually in place, you didn't see me lift it in, but I'm shimming around it so that what I can then do is take the window out, put the shims back in that are the right size, and then put the battens in to hold the window into place properly so it won't move around. Then, easily on the back of the first battens, I just put some of this nice double-sided foam, and that's going to give me a nice bit of insulation, both for noise and for temperature. Then the pane goes in on top of this and sticks to this, so if you put it in once, you're going to be leaving it in there, so get your shims right. And then on top of the pane goes another layer of this foam, and then the battens go in on top of that. Or into that, I suppose is the best way of describing it. Now that gesture basically just sums up the fact that that doesn't show any of the mistakes I made, doesn't show any of the trials and tribulations of that entire build and putting that window in. I cut most of them out. That just shows you the method. I'm just showing you this now from another angle, just really quick. It'll take a minute or so just to whiz through. It's just in case you haven't picked up all the different layers that go into one of these windows. And I think you can tell from the one that I've already put in, they actually looked surprisingly good. I was a little bit surprised at myself, even though I've probably gone around this the long way. Now, I'll say this with every part of this build. This is the way that I've decided to do it, from watching videos and from very little experience on it. 4 windows in, they look good. The next step I thought was to put flashing tape on. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just lining this up with the very edge of the frame and then just sticking it down with my hand. This isn't the finishing touch though, because this has got a tar-like sticky substance on the back that if you put it on like I'm doing here, you rub it on, it does flatten. You roller it on and it does adhere quite well, but you won't get the full adherement, in my opinion, in this kind of weather where it's a little bit damp and it's a little bit cold, unless you actually put heat on it. And you'll see right at the end, I just show you that I went round one with a heat gun. In truth, I did them all with a heat gun. I just didn't want to show all of them over and over again because it can get quite repetitive. Now, the heat gun I've got here is corded, and that is a big old pain because the cord is actually not long enough to hit the ground. That's why the reel's in between my legs. You won't see that. But Rhino vent goes up quickly with heat on it and it melts. Luckily, that's a piece that I still had to put some more of the flashing tape on, but just don't dwell on one spot longer than any of the others. In a way, the door frame is very similar to the windows. I've just used the same size pine for the frame itself, and I'm just screwing it straight into the 2x4s that are behind it and making sure that if it needs shimming, I just put some shims in there just to make sure everything is square, because I'm going to measure the doors from this and attach them to it. So the squarer I get this, I guess the better the doors are going to swing, but I'm still giving myself that margin for error of the whole check square, pretend it's square, carry on. So long as it's not going to cause me massive issues down the line, I am giving myself that beginner woodworker leeway. Screw it all into place. and then flashing tape again in exactly the same way that the windows were done. We'll get this job done. Didn't take very long at all.
Okay, we've got the windows in, we've got the flash band now all around the edges to stop the water coming in and through the side of the trim that we've put in for the door frames and the window frames. Next thing we've got to do is try and build a door. I couldn't get enough height because of the lintel over here to get a door bought off the shelf, and well, I want to give it a shot. So, the next thing we're going to have to do is measure it up. I'm going to split it in half, give myself a little bit of leeway, and then we're going to give it a shot. And I'm just going to make it with some 2x4s that I've picked up, some plywood, and brace it up and pop it in. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we won't make too much of a bodge of it.
Funny thing is with these videos, that is me at the time just about to start this job. And this is me at the end, having finished this job. So it's very much, I know what that guy was thinking and the optimism he was feeling. Unfortunately, there was a lot of pain that went into this process because I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't even check that these boards were the straightest out of the bunch. Get yourself some straight boards, because everything about what fails with this door is because the boards themselves were not straight to start with and there was no straight in them. You'll see here I used the clamp trick just to try and get this one untwisted so that I could lock in a 100mm screw to hold it in place. Even that wasn't enough. So I screwed it to the door frame, which I knew was square to the floor, and just pulled the door square, and then put some cross pieces in and some angle pieces in to hold it square. What I didn't check, and this is important, is that it was square front to back, if that makes sense. The whole door didn't have a twist in it. And spoiler alert, it did have a twist in it. And one of my doors now sits proud by about 5mm at the corner and is a little bit annoying. Anyway, if you're going to go down this route, I think I could have solved that just by checking that the wood was square in the first place. As an aside, it's lovely having a nice flat floor, big area to work on. Anyway, got myself a rebate bit in the router, and I could have just attached the plywood directly onto the door, but I thought I'd be clever. Watching Badger's workshop, he did this, and so I just put a rebate all the way around the door to sink the piece of ply in. It's over-engineering, but I think it might look nicer in the long run. The one thing you are left with when you do this is rounded corners, so either round off the piece of ply or get a chisel and square off the corners. I chose to round off the piece of ply, and then after a little bit of fettling with the sander and then blowing out some of the dust, putting a bit of glue in there, I managed to drop the piece of ply in and just nail it while it dried. It was all very, very easy. A little bit time consuming, but my hope was that this would just strengthen the door up, and it also gives me something to put the insulation up to.
The doors are, well, they're reasonably square. There's going to be some planing later on, I almost guarantee it, but I want to try and set up a cool jig for the router that's going to help me do the hinges, because in my haste to pack up the last shed, I didn't put the useful chisels available to use. I've only got very thin ones, and to set hinges with those is going to be a lot of work and a hard work. And since I've never done hinges with a router before, I thought it's a good time to learn. Credit where credit's due. When I first started looking at building this, before I found Ali Dimbach, I also found Badger's workshop, and he did one a little bit smaller than this, but pretty similar to start with, and the doors are his-ish design. So I saw a jig that he made, and I'm going to try and make it myself. If you want to do this with chisel, go ahead, do that. I'm going to give it a go with the router. They'll probably be swearing, it'll probably go wrong, but I'll show you every step of the way.
I doubted myself on this one, and actually, this was a really, really good way of doing it. I just grabbed some scrap pieces of wood and held them against the line that I'd drawn around the hinge, and then I just used a templating bit in the router with a bushing. And all of that is a lot simpler than I've just made it sound. I just used a bit of this super glue to hold the bits of board together. I did actually screw them through once I'd got them held fast, just to give them a little bit of strength, because I was going to use them on 12 different sides of the hinges. And as long as you set these up and leave yourself, I mean, you're going to be about 1mm tight because of the width of the bushing on the router, but as long as you don't mind taking a chisel to it and just tidying it up, it's a really, really good way of going, and it's repeatable. So I used it with the plunge base, so make sure when you're setting the depth you use a piece of wood that is the same thickness as the template itself, and then use the hinge that you want to sink in it. And with all of that, you'll get the right depth on your recess that you're going to be making. What you're not seeing, what you probably are, is how blunt that chisel is. All my best ones are packed away, but we made do and we got the job done in the end. A little bit more fettling as you go, but once you've done that, all you need to do is take the same template over to your door frame and make sure your body is right in the way of the camera so that nobody can actually see what you're doing, because that would just be perfect. And I actually, through pure luck, made it so I could clamp the template onto the actual door frame itself. Knocked out 3 on the door frame, made sure they were level with the ones on the door obviously, and then it came to the really, really smooth and easy part of the job, which was trying to hang these doors. You'll see. Before I do hang the doors, quick sales pitch. If you haven't got these self-centered bits for your drill, then you're going to be struggling to do hinges more than you need to. Either get a cheap set if you're going to do it just every now and then, or get this really nice set from Bosch, which I'll leave a link to in the description. They are one of the most popular things on my Amazon storefront, and there's a reason for that. They do a thoroughly good job. Anyway, once you've drilled and screwed all of the hinges, then it's time to screw the other side of the hinge into the door frame. And this is where the fun begins when you're working on your own. Obviously, first thing you're going to try and do is just pop a screw in there and hope that the door hangs itself off it and everything works. No. Then, yeah, you're going to hook it up on one foot and try and do the same thing. No. Then, a board to make sure it's a little bit higher. Oh yeah, keep your impact driver between your legs. That's smart. Then, stack some bits under the other corner of the door. And finally, yeah, it worked. Got to be honest with you, I cut about 30 minutes worth of footage down just to get that. Yeah, describes it all. Is it perfect because I'm a woodworker on YouTube and I should know what I'm doing? No. No, it does not fit into the door. And that's why we've got this handy handheld planer. I just went to town with it. I'm not going to lie to you, this is not a pretty door. This is just so I can secure the building in case it rains or for keeping my tools safe. It does a job.
Okay, I can't lie, those doors were a nightmare, but you don't have to do it the same way if you're going to do something like this. I just wanted something sturdy that I can fill with insulation to stop the noise coming out to spare my neighbours. So I've made them thicker than you need to have them, and I made them heavier than you need to have them, and they're going to get heavier. The idea is this one will be permanently closed, whereas this one will be on a lock and handle and can open. I'm going to put a bar down the middle attached to this door, which means it'll stop all the draft if I want to close both doors and get it all shut away in there. There is a bit of spring back at the moment, and I think most of that is in the door. But when they're together, they're shut, that's absolutely fine. I need to put a few more bits and bobs on. I'm going to put some strips around here to make it look pretty and to block all of the joints. And I'm going to paint the whole thing barn black. And that's it. Let's get all of the last bits done, whiz through it all, and then we can draw a line under this bit.
Yeah, you can't tell that I would be really happy when this is over. I thought I was actually at the end of the road here and that I was nearly done, but I had to put this extra bit of wood in, this extra 2x4, so that I could sink the lock in. Otherwise there's not enough meat to lock the lock into place. Yeah, sure, lock the lock into place. Anyway, I transferred the dimensions and traced around it, and then I chiselled out the recess, drilled it first and then chiselled out a recess so I could sink the lock in, drilled through so that I could get the key in, basically butchered my door, tore it apart, tried to make it look nice, failed, and then, well, just got the job done any which way I could. Used the wrong hammer. Get the mallet. Don't ruin your chisels. Got the mallet back out. And finally, yeah, subtly got it to fit. It is a good example of why you should take the little victories. Look at that face. Surprise and A little bit of relief. Now, to trim the door out, I needed strips. I didn't have any wood of the right dimension. I just had these non-treated 2x4s. Here's a little trick that I use because I don't have a table saw. If you take a piece of wood, hold it between the blade, and then stick another piece of wood to the base of your circular saw, the bit that's left is going to be the width of what you're trying to cut. Use the piece of wood that's stuck underneath your circular saw to guide your circular saw along the piece of wood you're trying to strip. I'll show you a different angle and it will become really apparent. Don't do it in one pass because it's too much on the motor. Do it in 2 or 3 passes and take your time. If you're not comfortable, don't do it at all. But look, here you can see, just run that guide piece across the board and what you're left with is a nice thin strip that you can attach to your door in a decorative fashion. It does leave it a little bit messy, so you're going to need to do a bit of sanding. And while you're at it, you may as well prepare the wood the right size for the door. So again, handy Craig jig, just gave it all a cut to the right length. Then I actually chiseled out all of the recesses for the lock and for the hinges, and yeah, another blunt chisel moment, and just pre-nailed it and put a bit of glue on, and then took it to the door, fitted it, and it covers up the joints really nicely. So with the rain, I just didn't want it getting in between the plywood and the door where we'd recessed it. And I think these just add a little bit of texture and make the door look a little bit nicer rather than just a plank of wood strapped to a frame. If you wonder why I'm using a hairdryer on the door, it's actually a mini leaf blower. Really handy actually. You'll see that in a review video coming up soon. It's just to get some of the dust off so I could paint it. Back to the barn paint, 2 coats of that, and I'm going to call these doors done for now.
Well, we got them painted, we got them hung, and yeah, it wasn't perfect. I said at the start, this is not a how-to video, so I have to apologise right now to everyone out there who's a carpenter, a joiner, anybody out there with way more experience who takes pride in what they do. This isn't how it should be done. Anyway, we got there in the end. I will get asked questions on where did I get the windows from, who did I buy them from, and I will do that in a video all at the end. I'll do it on its own video, as well as the insulation in the doors. I'm going to tack that on with something else. But I think the takeaway from this is, if you get the job done and you don't hurt yourself, and it works, and you don't look like a wally on video trying to do it, well, 2 out of 3 is not bad anyway. If you've enjoyed this build and you want to see how the series finishes, keep going. The next one will be up there if it's ready. If not, I'll pop something nice up there for you anyway. Thank you so much for watching as always. If you haven't subscribed, might be worth it. Consider it. And I'll see you over there. Thanks a lot.